Reb Chaim Shmuelevitz, Zichron Levrocha, for Parshas Metzora, sees something very, very fundamental in the Metzora. And by way of introduction, let's mention that there's a gigantic controversy about the Metzora. Is it physiological? Is it something that belongs to this world of physiology, of science, of medicine? Meaning we translate Metzora as leprosy, and that's what it is. Or is it something metaphysical, something that goes beyond nature? It's not really something that should be translated as leprosy. We translate it as leprosy only because we have no other way of translating it. We don't know of a better word to choose from, but it's not a real accurate translation because, there's a pathological skin disease called leprosy that's not to be identified with saras, according to the second approach. I would suggest that the machlokas here is between the Rambam and the Ramban, whereas the Ramban is very explicit. He's very outspoken in this week's parsha that tsaras is not physical; it's not physiological. You can't see it in a lab, and determine the
So this is the Ramban.
Ramban. Yeah, the Ramban. The Rambam is a lot less outspoken about this. It's not really explicit in the Rambam, but the Rambam tells us not to put coins in our mouth, right? So here's a coin, right? We'll say hello to Moshe. You see this coin?
Yeah.
The Rambam says not to put it into your mouth. And the reason Rambam says so is because you might contract tsaras, which means that the Rambam held that tsaras is really pathological, contagious, and it's transferred to a person by germs. And in case a tsaras, a Metzora, left his germs on a coin, and then you go ahead and you put the coin in your mouth, the Rambam, as a great physician as he was, held that that was very dangerous. But again, the Ramban, Nachmanides, Ramban, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman, is very outspoken about the fact that no, this is not physiological. If it were physiological, why do we need the Kohen? Why are there all sorts of laws that determine whether he's a Metzora or not? Did he have this kind of nega? Did he have that kind of nega? And moreover, why does it only apply in Eretz Yisrael? If it's physiological, it should apply anywhere on the face of the globe. And the Ramban therefore wins this debate, if you ask me. And Reb Chaim, certainly as a great Baal Musar, accepts the approach of the Ramban, and therefore he's going to be focused on what is the punishment of tsaras. If it's physiological, it's not necessarily a punishment. If a person exposes himself to germs and contracts a disease, I wouldn't say that that disease is a punishment in the strict sense. Again, there may be a divine plan over here, but theoretically, a person was poshea, he was negligent, he wasn't careful. And if he wasn't careful in terms of protecting his health, he may contract a disease. That's not a punishment. But if you accept the Ramban, that we're talking about something that's totally metaphysical, it's a sign from heaven, what is the punishment of tsaras? What is the nature of the onesh of tsaras? One more introduction. The Gemara in Erchin seems to assume that the sin for which a Metzora is punished and he contracts tsaras is none other than Lashon Hara. And that also would sort of point in the direction of the Ramban that we're talking about Metzora as a metaphysical phenomenon. It's a punishment for a certain type of a sin. And it's something that really, in a certain sense, is a great gift to man because it gives him a pointer and an education revealing to him where he has to do his tshuva, where he was failing, where he was lacking, and how he can go about and improve his situation and free himself from further punishment. And one of the sources for the fact that tsaras is indeed a punishment is the case of Miriam. You may remember that Miriam was stricken with tsaras. And as a result, the entire encampment of the Jewish people in the desert was held up, was slowed down, waiting for her, because she was apparently guilty, whatever that means, of Lashon Hara against her brother Moshe. So the Ramban again wants to know, what is the nature of the punishment of tsaras? And Kedarko Bakodesh, he starts with one presentation and he completely rejects it. That first presentation is, in the language of Reb Chaim, Koved HaCholi. So let's spell that. Koved is Chaf Vav Bet Dalid. Okay, that has nothing to do with COVID, if you know what I'm talking about. But Koved HaCholi. Choli is Chet Vav Lamed Yud. Literally translated as the weight of the disease, meaning the suffering, the anguish, the pain from that disease. Is that the nature of the punishment? Meaning, is the Metzora suffering so much that he has this very severe punishment of being in that state of suffering? And Reb Chaim very quickly and very forcefully rejects this. He says that can't be true. Before we get into his proof that this can't be true, I'll just mention that we don't know that the Metzora really suffers that much. There's a lot of disease out there which creates pain and suffering. We don't know that tsaras fits into that category. And moreover, if tsaras is indeed metaphysical, then pain might be totally out of place. Why? Because pain is the way the body sends a message that something is going wrong in the physiology of man. In other words, pain is a message that you've got something, let's say in your arm, something chas v'shalom, breakage. That pain, and it's very painful, obviously, it is a message. The limbs of your body through the brain are sending messages, are crying out. I need some sort of a cure for this terrible situation. But in the case of something that's totally metaphysical, it's just a sign from Shamayim. It's hard to say that would generate pain. But that's not why Reb Chaim rejects Koved HaCholi as the explanation of the pain and suffering of the Metzora. He has a totally different underlying argument against this approach. And it's based on a Gemara in Nedarim. So if you get a chance to look this up in the Sefer Sichot Musar, this is the first line in this piece. You can make a note of it. It's on page Reish Samachet. That's the equivalent of 268. And on that page, he opens up by quoting a Gemara in Nedarim. The Gemara in Nedarim quotes a pasuk that refers to Miriam after she was stricken with tsaras as equating her situation with that of a mess, mem tough, a dead person. And the Gemara says that Metzora chashiv kemes. He's considered like a dead person. Now watch the way Reb Chaim's mind works. Very fascinating. He says the following. you might think that suffering is as bad as death. And therefore, maybe the suffering and the pain of a Metzora is so intense that it's like death itself. It's as bad as death itself. You know, there are people who believe that if a person is suffering, we should morally put his life to an end to spare him from the suffering. But that attitude is totally antithetical to the halachic mind and to the halachic man. And we've discussed this in the past, that Reb Chaim over and over again points out that the greatest gift that God gives man is life itself. And no matter how much suffering you endure, chas v'shalom, life is still great. And Reb Chaim would often quote psukim and mamorei chazal to prove this point. For example, you'll see that in the very beginning of this essay, of this shmooze, Reb Chaim quotes a pasuk in Tehillim. You'll all remember this pasuk because we say it, and we said it even yesterday and the day before yesterday. David HaMelech says, Yasar Yisrani Ka, V'lamavis lo nisanani. Meaning, even if you bring Yisurim are pain upon me, but you spared me from death. And further, Eov says, "My yisonein adam chai," meaning don't complain as long as you're alive. The greatest gift that God could give you is life itself. And the Gemara in Kedushin says, "Dayo li adam shu chai." It's enough that man is still alive. You know, recently I heard a story about one of the greats, one of the Jewish greats that was suffering from what we call in Yiddish yena machlo, which is because we don't want to say the word cancer. It's so scary. And they told him, the doctors, that if they didn't administer a certain curative process, he would die quickly and be spared from pain. And he said, no, no, no. I want to continue living at all costs, no matter how much I'm suffering. That's the great gift of life. And then Reb Chaim quotes a medrash. I think we discussed this in the past, but it's worth reviewing it. The Gemara says, and the medrash, the Gemara is in Sota Daf Yud Aleph. This is here at the very beginning of this Maimar, that Paro, before he enslaved the Jewish people, he called in three of his advisors. And they were Yisro, Eov, and Bilam. And it was Bilam who gave Paro the Eitzah to enslave and then basically to annihilate the Jewish people. And Bilam was punished with the sword. He was killed by the sword. That was his punishment. Eov said nothing, and his punishment was the suffering of Eov, Yisurim of Eov. The whole book of Eov is about suffering. Yisro, on the other hand, stood up and ran away, meaning he demonstrated actively he doesn't want to be part of this. And therefore, he was given the great gift, the reward, that his descendants would be teaching Torah. Says Reb Chaim in his beautiful analytic style, you see that the worst of all punishments is not the Yisurim of Eov. It was actually Bilam who did the worst crime against the Jewish people, and Bilam was given the cherev. He was given death. Apparently, death is a worse punishment because the punishment has to fit the crime than the Surim of Eo. So the bottom line is, getting back to Metzora for a moment, it can't be that Metzora, because of his suffering, is called a mess. And that leads Reb Chaim back to his original question. So why is a Metzora chashiv kemes? Why does the Gemara in Masechta Nedarim say that the Metzora is like a dead person? Before Reb Chaim answers this question, he asks another question. The Gemara says that not only is a Metzora chashiv kemes, but there are three other categories of individuals who are chashiv kemes. And they are the Ani, Ayin, Nun, Yud, the poor person. Number two, the Suma, the blind person. And number three, a childless person, a person who never has children. And Reb Chaim wants to know if Metzora is put into this category, and that makes the number four. Is there a common denominator to all these four? Or is it just that all these four are suffering so much that they're all chashiv kemes, but each one is chashiv kemes for a different kind of phenomenon of misa, a different kind of misa? Or is there one misa that all these four, that's common, that's, we'll call it the lowest common denominator, that links in all of these together? So I was going to ask Moshe this question, but I don't know if he's still there. I mean, I see his name, but that's about all I see.
I'm here.
Oh, you are there. Oh, okay. So let's now present Reb Chaim's understanding of, number one, the Metzora, number two, the Ani, number three, he who has no sight, and number four, he who has no children. Why are all these four people gathered together under one category of chashiv kemes? What is the common denominator? Reb Chaim says the following, that is there a door open over there that what?
Oh. Yeah, I can close it.
Oh, okay. If you don't mind. Reb Chaim says that the key to unlock this mystery lies in the Suma, the blind person. And he suggests the following. On a moral level, why is the power of sight so important? To the extent in which a person who has no power of sight is considered kemes, as if he's not here in this world. Now, you and I, again, would have come up with a very simple mitzius, a physical reality answer to that question. If you can't see, there's so many pleasures in life that you can't enjoy, and not only that, it's very dangerous. A blind person never needs a special animal to guide him, or he needs a stick, whatever he needs, to tap around and get. We can just imagine. Here in Israel, there's something called the Blind Museum. I don't know, did the yeshiva ever take you there?
I've been there.
The Blind Museum. It's supposed to be a very powerful experience. You actually experience being blind, so to speak, for I don't know how long is it, a half hour, less. Now they have also a deaf museum. So Reb Chaim says that the true abstract understanding of Re'iyah, of the importance of what he calls Koach HaRe'iyah, the power of sight, is to be revealed by a pasuk about Moshe Rabbeinu. As you know, Moshe Rabbeinu was raised in the palace of Paro by Basya. Vayigdal Moshe, vayetze el achav. Moshe goes out to his brothers. Vayar b'sivlosam. Let's underline that word vayar. Rashi explains, what's vayar? Literally means he saw their suffering. Says Rashi, he identified. What's the word I'm looking for? He empathized. Rashi says, Nasan eno v'libo lios Metzora alehem. Moshe Rabbeinu suffered together with the people. And why? Because of Vayar, because of what he's able to see. So on a metaphysical level, sight means the ability to see, to identify with the suffering of others so that you can help them, which is what Moshe Rabbeinu was out to do and to accomplish. Reb Chaim says that if you look in Rabbeinu Yonah, you know, Rabbeinu Yonah was a contemporary of the Ramban, and he wrote a great work called Shari Tshuva. So you will see that Rabbeinu Yonah says that through the power of hearing, you could hear about the suffering of others, or on the contrary, to be happy if you hear that something great happened to them. And similarly, with regard to Re'iyas Einayim, you could see and identify with the happiness of others, and you could see and identify with the suffering of others. So Chaim says the following, and this is really, in essence, the punchline of the whole shmooze. The difference between a mess who's dead and a live person, who's chai, who's alive, is the ability to identify with the other person. Man, by his very nature, by his very essence, in order to live, has to identify with others' suffering. It's called nosei be'ol chavero. He, so to speak, shares the weight and the burden that his friend is carrying. If he can't do so, he's chashiv kimes. He's missing the essence of being a live person. Moshe Rabbeinu is nasan eino v'libo. Moshe Rabbeinu is able to put his eyes, nasan eino, Rashi emphasizes, and the pasuk says vayar b'sivlosam, to see how others, in this case his Jewish brethren, are suffering. And Reb Chaim brilliantly quotes a Sepharno, you know, one of the great Spanish commentaries on the Torah, who says, on the pasuk in Breishis Memches, it says, "V'ene Yisrael kovdu miliros." In other words, at the end of his life, Yaakov couldn't see. Mizoken, because of his older age.
Wait, Yaakov or Yitzchak?
Yaakov, I think. Do me a favor, if you have a chumash, see if you could open up to Breishis Memches. If you tell me what parsha it's in, I just...
Well, sorry, what'd you say?
Breishis Memches, what parsha is it? Just tell me what parsha it's in.
Sorry, 1 second.
I think it's in Vayechi, so it's not.
Vayechi, yeah.
Oh, so if it's in Vayechi, then we're talking about Yaakov. So it says in Parshas Vayechi that Yaakov couldn't see. And Yosef brings his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, to Yaakov. And the Sforno says that the pasuk indicates Vayigash Osam Elov. Yosef brings his two sons close to Yaakov, Vayishak lehem, Vayichabek lehem. And Yaakov has to kiss them and hug them, says the Sforno, Kedei shetidavek nafsho b'hem, v'tochel aleim berchosel. In order to bless someone, you have to have a connection to them. You have to love them. And then the Sforno adds, Kol zeh mishum shelo hayachal liros. She'ilu hayachal liros, if only Yaakov was able to see them, Haisa birchasol chala aleim birosam osam. Then the sight itself would have been enough for Yaakov to have that intense love connection to his grandchildren in order for the bracha to be chal, the bracha could be meaningful. Says Reb Chaim, here's the commonality between the four categories that Chazal in the Gemara in Sota, in the Gemara in Nedarim, says that they're considered like a mess. The common denominator is they cannot identify with others. They cannot give. Man, by his very essential nature, is a giver. Man is called upon to give, to be similar to the Almighty. The Almighty is the ultimate giver. We have the mitzvah period for Rivya to create life because God creates life in order to give and bestow goodness, and we too are called upon to create life and bestow goodness. And the Metzora, his punishment is Yeshev Badad Chutz Lamachna. He is expelled from all three machnos. You know that the encampment in the desert was divided up into three machnos. There was Machne Shechina, Machne Levia, Machne Yisrael, and the Metzora was the only Tomei who would be sent out of all machnos. And that's called Badad Yeshev. He has to be alone. Loneliness is B'didut. And I really wish and pray that Hashem should have compassion on all those who are lonely, all those who are alone. Because B'didut is a horrible punishment, a horrible experience. The Metzora, since he's boded, since he cannot come into the machna, he cannot see anyone. It's a whole discussion about how the Kohen could see him. He cannot feel and identify with the plight of others. And therefore he's considered like a mess. And now Reb Chaim wants to say that an ani, a poor person, is also chashuv k'mes, because the ani has nothing to give to others. His poverty is so intense that he cannot share with others. The sin that we mentioned earlier of Lashon Hara means that he didn't feel for others. He spoke negatively about someone else, pejoratively. That itself separates him from man, and he will be separated in a badad situation. And the ani, unfortunately and tragically, cannot possibly identify and give to others. And here, Reb Chaim wants to say that the Summa, who can't see the plight of others, the ani who can't share anything with others, the Metzora, who's so far removed from all of society and is so lonely and isolated that he can't see and identify and give to others, is very similar to the last category of the four, Misha Ein Lo Boneh. And here Reb Chaim has a momentous chidush, a momentous insight into the parsha of the two ladies that were fighting over the child. And this is the story told in Tanakh about Shlomo HaMelech and his wisdom in Malachim Aleph, Perek Gimel. There were two women who gave birth, and you know the story. One of them, unfortunately, the child died. And there was a fight that broke out between the two mothers as to which child had died and which child was survived. Each mother claimed that survived child for her own. And Reb Chaim asks a brilliant question. And we could read this parsha over and over again and not pay attention. Reb Chaim opens our eyes. He says the following: the woman who lost her child knew very well that that child was not hers, that she was really trying to steal the surviving child. She would have to live her whole life knowing that she had stolen this child and it wasn't this child. How could a person possibly reach that low level, stoop to the lowest level that he could live with that lie his whole life, her whole life? She knows this is not her child, and she's going to raise the child knowing full well that it's not her baby, but somebody else's baby. How could that be? How could a person reach that level? And the answer is because life itself means the ability to give. I'll just take a little bit of a, if you don't mind, kind of sidetrack for a moment. My wife's cousin, and this is not a fundraiser, but my wife's cousin has an organization called Bonei Olam. I don't know if you heard about it.
No.
You could read a lot about it. What's the purpose of Bonei Olam? Bonei Olam is a charity fund and an organization with many, many volunteers who help childless couples. And there are many ways in which you could try to help a childless couple. One of which is to gather together the funds for some of the most sophisticated, advanced, and very expensive kind of treatments in the area of fertility. But amongst the various projects that they have, one of them I find particularly fascinating. And it belongs to the realm of, I think, metaphysics. What Bonei Olam has done is they have gathered together couples who are childless with single people who have not been able to find a shidduch. And they organize an agreement, a kind of covenant, if you will, between these two groups of people. Each one is assigned to another person, and the agreement is, I'll pray for you and you pray for me. I'll pray that you should find a shidduch, a marriage partner, and be able to bring children into this world. And you pray for me and my wife that we could have children. And the success rate is absolutely phenomenal, mind-boggling. And Chazal say, if you pray for someone else, then you will be answered first. So they have this mutual prayer in which those who are childless are praying for those who have no marriage partner, no partner in life. And those who have no partner in life are praying on behalf of those who are childless. So if you'd like, remind me one day, I'll bring you an article that was written up about this in, I think it was Mishpacha magazine. My wife showed it to me, about Bonei Olam, which literally means creating worlds. So getting back to this lady knew very well that she had stolen a child. And yet she would live with that life, with that lie her whole life, because the other option, the other alternative was death itself. Says Reb Chaim, Ad Kidei Kach Zakuk Ha'adam Leitiv Im Zulato. To what extent does a man need the ability to give to someone else to such an extent that he'll do anything, just to have a child, to be mative, to give to that child. And therefore, the most severe punishment is to be childless. That's like tzaras. That's like the inability to give. That's chashiv kimes. Because man, in his very essence, if he loves life and he embraces life, he embraces the ability to give. If he's taken out of that ability to live, then he's chashiv kimes. So let's just summarize that Reb Chaim has done an amazing job over here in many different facets of this shmuz. Number one, to take a Gemara in Masechta Nedarim, to give us a whole nother approach to what the punishment is like for these four people, to give us a new insight into what a Metzora is all about, to find a common link between these four categories, but most important of all, to give us a new definition of life itself. Only a Baal Musar, on the level of Reb Chaim, could possibly redefine what life is all about. And when we think about it, in this period of time of Sphira, and by the way, we've now entered into the next 2 weeks or 15 days where everybody agrees we're in Avelus. According to all the minhagim, this is the overlap where we mourn and grieve the loss of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. And the Gemara tells us in Yevavos, why did they die? Because lo nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. They didn't identify with the next one. They weren't sensitive to his needs. And the idea of Sfiras HaOmer on a metaphysical level is tikkun, is that we should work to improve. And when we work day by day to improve, the first goal and the first purpose, or matara, we call it in Hebrew, is to fix up this sin of shelo nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. So in the period coming up, you're in yeshiva, you're in dormitories, you're in the Beis Medrash together, you're in the Charochel. Be very, very careful. Try as hard as you can to be a giver and not a taker. The Almighty is a giver. He's the ultimate giver. He gives life. We have to imitate God. We have to be givers. An ani, tragically, he's poor. He can't be a giver. A Metzora is badad yeshev chutz l'machdi. He can't be a giver. An individual who can't see others cannot really give to others. And a person who doesn't have children cannot bestow goodness upon his children. So this concept of giving is really what Rabbi Akiva himself taught. Rabbi Akiva said, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha zeh klal gadol b'Torah." Rabbi Akiva said that the greatest principle of Torah is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What a tragedy it is that his students didn't live up to that standard. And maybe because Rabbi Akiva set a very high standard and anticipated that his students would reach that high standard, and unfortunately it did not. And we've said it over and over again about the difference between Hillel and Shammai. And, Hillel, when he quoted the dissenting view of Shammai, he would say, first, I want to tell you what Shammai has to say, then I'll tell you my opinion. So sensitive. My Rebbe told us about his grandfather, Reb Chaim, that if you came into Reb Chaim and you said over some insight, of your Torah, and Reb Chaim knew that it Hapnishin on, as we said, yes, didn't even begin. But yes, Reb Chaim would try to develop it with him until finally he felt that he walked out of there, standing on high, as if he had been mechadish, a great chiddush. These are levels that are tremendous levels. Reb Chaim's chesed was beyond belief. There was a fire that burnt down most of Brisk. And Reb Chaim's house was one of the few houses that still stood. And Reb Chaim invited all those who were without a roof over their head to come sleep in his house. Some slept in his bed. He was a man of chesed, of giving. Chazal compare Pirya Verivya, bringing children into the world, to chesed, because the purpose of bringing children into the world is to give, to bestow upon them, to develop them. Now, sometimes parents have to discipline their children, but the discipline has to be done in a certain way to make sure that the ultimate goal is the benefit of the child. So that's the challenge of raising children. Hashem, you'll all have that opportunity.
Amen.
And I give you a bracha. I mean, I can't hug you on Zoom, so that element is, of Yaakov's relationship to,
You can see us.
but I can see you, at least that. And you see me. And I can even see Moshe. So he really is there. Unless there's somebody like that AI created that looks very similar to him. I don't know. But that's the idea. The idea is that man, according to Chaim's definition, is ultimately a giver. And if you rob him of that ability to give, then you've basically robbed him of life itself. So Arba Chashuvim Kemes, these four who unfortunately and tragically have been robbed of their ability to give, they're Chashuvim Kemes. And what's the pitaron? What's the solution for these people? Well, in the case of Suma, he's going to have to use his other senses in order to identify with the plight of others. In the case of an ani, okay, he won't be able to give money for the benefit of others, but there are other methods and ways in which he can help others. In the case of Metzora, he's got to live out that period of time, chutz lamachna and boded, but he'll be back. The Kohen is going to bring him back into the machna. But perhaps the most difficult is Misha Ein Lo Banu. And here we look to our greats. I could mention to you a whole bunch of greats who did not have children. Some of them would adopt children. Others would have students and Hasidim. Lubavitcher Rebbe did not have any children, died without children. But he had thousands and tens of thousands of Hasidim. They were his children. The Rambam opens up Hilchas Talmud Torah and he says, V'shinantam levanecha, teach your sons, elu talmidecha, shetalmidim chashuvim kibonim. You give life to a Talmud. I hope and I pray that all of you will be able to give both in the physical and in the spiritual realm. And in that way, Kiem Chayenu, you'll be zochet to life on the highest level, the life of giving, the life of being similar to the Ribono Shalom, of being nosnim, Kein Yiratzon. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi.